Good morning and happy Friday to everyone, and also happy Halloween, the day before Halloween. So we have a very exciting, fun, Halloween-themed television for you today. So this week's of television will be all about brand SEO and the horrors of what happens when you don't do it correctly. I'm Brandon Heagle. I'm the Chief Digital Officer here at Stellar Rising, and I'm really excited to present this horrific episode. Joining me will be our SEO Director, John Morabito, who's also our very own mad scientist, and he's going to take you through everything he's seen in his SEO lab with some of our existing clients, some of our other brands out in the marketplace that have had some challenges with brand SEO from time to time. So without anything further, I will turn it over to John to take us through today's episode.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Brandon. As Brandon noted, everyone, today we're going to be looking in episode 23 at the horrors of a poor brand SERP presence. And SERP stands for search engine results page. So what we're really talking about here is poor search results for brand search terms. Before we get into what we're the actual subject of today's discussion, I wanted to sort of start with this quote about what a brand really is. So a brand is not a product or a promise or a feeling. It's the sum of all of the experiences you have with a company. And we feel that this is important because ultimately, one of the most important stops along the way is going to be Google search. In fact, Google search is often the first place that people experience your brand. So the question then becomes, what are we doing to ensure a strong experience, a good brand presence for people who are searching our brand in search results? Ultimately, strong brand SEO equals a strong brand. If we look at brands like Apple, they're extraordinarily strong search results, packed with different types of features and packed with accurate information. Ultimately, as marketers, if we're doing things right, we should be seeing growth in brand demand. And at the same time, bad experiences with our brand can work against us and actually damage our brand equity. So as SEO marketers, we optimize the brand experience through optimizing brand keywords. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So brand keywords or branded keywords are those that either include your brand name, your product name. So they might not include your brand's name at all. They might just include a proprietary brand product name, or they could include your domain name. So the idea here is we want to say our name in Google 3 times and ask, do you like what you see? Some of the reasons that we should optimize for brand search are that these include or represent a brand, an owned audience. So these are folks who, through one means or another, we've already worked hard to get them to search our brand. And when they do that, we want to ensure that they're having the best experience. These terms also convert higher than non-brand terms. Very often, SEM campaigns will focus heavily around brand terms because there's a great deal of conversion there. And traditionally, SEO campaigns, with the exception of those at Stellar Rising, don't really focus as much on brand terms. They're generally more focused on non-brand terms. So for us, there's really a key opportunity here to focus where, as a performance-driven agency, to focus where the conversions actually are, and that's often around your brand terms. One of the other cool aspects of this is that it's harder for your competition to own and steal these terms. When it comes to a non-brand term, you're constantly vying for position and fighting with your competition to ensure that you own that real estate. When it comes to a brand term, assuming that you don't have competitors in the marketplace who are retail partners who are actually selling your product and your brand name, it's very difficult for them to steal positions away from you, and it's harder for them to ever even own them. It's also easier in general for us to manipulate, to impact change, to see effects around our changes for brand terms. This is because your site already has a strong relevance for your brand terms. Very often what we see as the challenge or the problem is a lack of relevance, a lack of content, a lack of structure, and these are things that we can very often impact with the help of your team. Another sort of side of this is the way that Google looks at the entity connections between non-brand and brand queries. One of the ways that those entity connections sort of manifest themselves is through the impact on suggested search results. So if you search something like mattresses, you might see the word Casper in one of those suggested search queries. And this is because Casper is frequently searched with the term mattresses. And the idea is that as Google in their algorithm or in their data sees more co-occurring instances of your brand plus another known entity, they view you as more relevant or more connected to that entity. Another aspect of this is personalization. So the more that you have your audience interacting with and going to your website, the higher your website appears in non-brand search results for people who have already visited your website. So some of the common,
John, quick question for you before jumping into the horrors. Would you say that a lot of brands overlook the importance of their brand SEO because they just assume that because they're the brand, Google's going to know who they are and there's nothing they need to do because Google will figure it out?
100%. Absolutely 100%. Yeah. I mean, earlier I mentioned that not only do brands often overlook this, but sometimes the SEO industry at large overlooks this. And that's sort of one of the areas that I have been trying to really showcase as a key area of opportunity for everyone. So I would say absolutely, words straight out of some people's mouths that you said, they were like, doesn't Google just automatically rank us? Like, we are the brand, why would there be anyone else ranking? But when we get into some of the examples of the types of things that we're actually going to see, I think it'll start to become more clear that these are absolutely things that are not going to just sort themselves out automatically, and that we need to make sure that we're proactively ensuring that we're providing the most accurate information about our brand. Thanks for that question. So here are some of the common horrors. The first common horror would be out-of-stock products. So what could be more frustrating for a consumer than getting to know your product, searching for something that they want to buy, and then getting to out-of-stock pages? Misinformation is one of the more common ones that we see, and this is where other websites might be providing information about your brand and doing so incorrectly. Unclaimed Google My Business or knowledge panel results, and those are the panels to the side of any given brand search result that indicate the brand name and maybe a little short description about the brand. And very often we'll see that Google is pulling this information from what's called the knowledge graph, which is basically a massive index of entities and known information about those entities and the connections between them. And it's so big and so vast that oftentimes they'll sort of miss some of these connections and get information wrong. And it's often our job to help show Google the path when it comes to their knowledge graph information. Negative reviews, general web spam. So sometimes we'll even see spam search results related to a brand. Sometimes we'll see photos that don't belong to your business. In one business, we even saw it was a commercial entity, and we saw a picture of someone put a selfie up for this entity. And so we had to go in and tell Google, hey, this photo doesn't belong with this business. And these can really, if you're not paying attention, these things can really impact the way that your brand is seen in search results. Questions answered in your Google My Business. So Google My Business, if you have any type of local presence, does have a feature where people can ask and answer questions, and anyone can answer these questions. The cool thing about it is that you can also be the one to ask them. So part of our practice for many of our clients in controlling brand presence is to actually bring out some of our FAQ content directly onto our Google My Business profile page, where we as the brand sort of anonymously ask ourselves a question and then come in as the brand and answer it with exactly how we want that question to be answered. Similarly, it's important to have a proactive approach to answering those questions, even if you're not the one posting them. We'll see instances of other brands owning what we call people also ask boxes. And these are those boxes that will appear. Google will literally say people also ask, and then it's a series of sort of accordion questions. Many times these will be sort of fundamental questions about shipping and returns policy, or maybe how to get in contact with the brand. And sometimes we see these owned by people who are not providing the right information. At bare minimum, I could pull up lackluster meta information, or just meta information that's not as good as it could be for virtually any brand. And this is something that is part of our regular on-page optimization process, but indeed is a common sort of brand SEO issue. Featured snippets, which are a little bit different than people also ask boxes, but actually present that information even more directly at the top of search results, can often have incorrect information about brands. And we're going to share an example of that in today's presentation. And then one of the more disappointing ones, or horrific, if you will, would be retailers or marketplaces outranking you for your own products. And this is one of the more challenging ones that really has to do with overall systemic health of your website, pushing up your authority, and then ultimately trying to capture those rankings. But today I'm going to share with you 5 examples of branded search horror. So the first horror here would be bad contact info. So for one of our brands, in executing our branded search audit, we did a search for Everlane contact info. If you're interacting with an e-commerce site, you very well might need to contact them before purchase, after purchase, to get information. And so we did this search, and because we were located in New York, we were actually served a phone number that's related to their Google My Business profile for one of their store locations. This phone number redirects you to a voicemail, which then redirects you to an email. It's probably not the customer experience that we want our audience to have. I know, for one, I would be frustrated with that experience. And in all likelihood, this phone number shouldn't appear here at all. The other aspect of this is that we noticed that the page that we house any type of contact information, which actually ended up being an email, is really vague. It just said help and then bar Everlane. So Google was actually so desperate to showcase this information about, hey, this is where you can find the contact info, that Google themselves, with their own AI, has rewritten the title tag, the contact and FAQ-Everlane piece there. That's algorithmically written by their AI to provide a better search result. So we're doing such a poor job at providing an adequate search result for our audience that Google's actually coming in and being like, oof, let me fix that for you. So what we want to do here is we want to address the intent of the page. We made the recommendation and indeed changed this page to say contact and FAQ, so it's clear that you can find both contact and FAQ information. And over time, we actually worked with the brand to launch an entirely separate support subdomain, which houses information, contact, etc. We got rid of this phone number and search results and really cleaned up this presence for them. Another horror here would be out-of-stock products. And again, not to pick on this brand, but we had a lot of great findings with them. So Everlane backpacks previously showed Everlane ranking in the top 18 positions, with 6 of those 18 positions being out-of-stock product pages. So again, this is probably not the user experience that we want for our audience. We've done the hard work to make them aware of our backpacks. They want to buy backpacks from us. And indeed, most people are going to click the top 3 or top results. But when you start getting further down the page, it almost becomes a minefield of stuff that's no longer in stock. So if for whatever reason the commuter backpack caught my eye and I clicked that from these search results, I'd get served a page that said, sorry, this product's no longer available. Again, this is really not what our customers want. And so in this case, what we did was we worked with them to identify out-of-stock products. This is an ongoing process that we support for all of our e-commerce clients, and ensure that we're redirecting these product pages back to appropriate category pages, or if they never really had any value, making sure that they 404 so that they drop out of search results and our audience doesn't get this type of poor user experience. Horror number 3, as I mentioned, would be an example of these featured snippet results ranking directly in the top of search results. So if someone searches where does Birchbox ship, instead of getting direct information from the brand about the countries they serve, they're getting information from a website called My Subscription Addiction, which is basically providing information that, according to the brand, isn't fully accurate. In this case, it was about surfacing this information and making it more clear on their website, and also having an individual landing page which was optimized and dedicated to this concept of international shipping. This is a query that you should check out on your own website. If your international shipping information is buried in like an FAQ page or something like that, you don't have a dedicated international shipping info page, this query might yield results for your own brand that you're not super thrilled with. So go ahead and check that out and see if someone else is owning your search results. Horror number 4 is retail partners outranking you. And this can happen for a number of different reasons. Oftentimes, these retail partners, in this case, Sephora, outranking Dr. Dennis Gross for one of their product-specific queries. This is often because Google understands partially the intent of the shopper, and that multi-cart experience or sort of a multi-brand checkout is what many of these shoppers are looking for. But similarly, we're also seeing that we're not anywhere above the fold. So while it might not be possible for us to always get that #1 position, given the fact that Google might have a preference toward these more authoritative websites. We do see that there's some opportunity to get further up the page as we're no longer in the top of fold. So in this particular case, we made changes for relevance, increasing the number of keyword occurrences on the product pages, and ultimately helping to improve the ranking through improving authority and relevance for those product pages. And then our last horror here, and perhaps one of the most horrific, because it's something that we have a hard time directly controlling, is poor brand recognition or reputation. So we search dry bar near me, and this reveals a number of Yelp listings. And virtually all of them, or in fact all of them, have below 3 or fewer stars. Most of them have 2.5 stars. This obviously suggests it might be time for this brand to think about actively controlling their brand reputation through reputation management, doing active outreach to negative reviewers to try to rectify the situation, ensuring that we're delivering top-notch service, trying to get an understanding of what these negative reviews are saying and addressing the issues, whether it's on-time appointments or cancellation policies, really trying to get an understanding of what our audience is saying and then making changes holistically across the brand, not just SEO changes, that really help to improve the overall authority and reputation of the brand. When people search your brand, they're going to see this stuff and they might be put off. But the other aspect, and why I said this is perhaps the most horrific, is Google not only looks at the number of backlinks or authority coming into our websites through other authoritative sources, but they are now also looking at the overall reputation of brands. What happens off of your website in terms of what people say about you, the overall sentiment of the statements that are being made by your customers actually play into your ability to rank for non-brand terms. So in the case of Drybar, they might actually see impact when Google releases their algorithm updates that are aimed at sort of fine-tuning relevance and better understanding authority, because nothing that's happening on their website, but simply because of what their audience is saying about them. So this is, as I said, one of the most dangerous places to have these brand problems. And one of the areas that we partner with our clients to help be more aware of. We can help to provide strategies for how to get good reviews out of folks who are happy with your services, but ultimately it's something that needs to happen in a great level of partnership across the brand, across customer care teams, across boots on the ground to make sure that we're getting those 5-star reviews.
John, that's some scary, scary stuff. I've got goosebumps over here. Of all of the horrors that you shared and the list of things you presented, what would you say are the most horrific things that can happen to your brand, Serp?
So I would say outside, so this is definitely the most horrific, right? Number 5, we saved the scariest for last here. But outside of that, the Everlane example of the inaccurate contact information is another one that I would say is extraordinarily challenging, not only from a brand perception perspective, because I'm sure everyone who went down that rabbit hole of automated voice message to email, and then email that says we'll get back to you in 48 hours is like, I'm never dealing with this brand again. And the sort of, as we stated earlier, right, the degradation of brand equity, the impact to brand equity that those types of brand moments have. As marketers, we're sort of concerned with creating brand moments that are positive and where we win the affinity of our audience, and that we sort of win a place in their mind and their memory. These are instances where you can win a place in someone's memory that you don't want, where they remember a bad experience that they have with you. So I would say the noting other bad experiences that people have with you and sort of viscerally experiencing that through reading how horrific and how terrible the service was. And then similarly having that own bad experience when you're simply trying to interact with someone who you want to give your money to. Like, hey, I want to give you money, but I have a question. We'll reach out to you in 48 hours. So that's definitely an area where you want to make sure that you're delivering top-notch customer care as well as customer service. And Google speaks to that as well. In their Google Search Quality Raters guidelines, they want to ensure that it's easy to find who's behind the website and it's easy to contact people if they're taking your money. So those are our 2 top ones.
Yeah, and I think you touched on an important point with how you open with the definition of brand, which is all the touch points with the consumer. The pre-purchase and the advertising is what a lot of us are familiar with, but It's the actual interaction of purchasing and acquiring the product or service from the brand, and then certainly how your service retained afterwards through customer service, whether pre-purchase or post. So I do think it's important that when we think about what shows up in Google, it's not just that pre-branding, process. It's all the various things that a consumer can need through the brand touch points.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the old sort of, it's almost a cliche, but like it costs a lot more to acquire a new customer than to keep one, right? And so this whole area of brand SEO is not only aimed at acquisition, but really has a special place in customer retention and making sure that the people who have already used and interacted with your brand are going to continue doing so.
Great.
Awesome. Well, that's it. Moving on, if you're looking for any ways to contact us, you can reach me at jmorabito@Stellar Rising. If you think you might have some horrific brand issues on your website, shoot me an email. We'd be happy to provide a free opportunity analysis and show you exactly where we see opportunity, not only around brand search, but around your website's SEO holistically.
And thank you, John. That was great. Very entertaining. A lot of fun today. Have a happy Halloween. Again, I'm Brandon Heagle, Chief Digital Officer. You can also reach out to me if there's anything we can do to help support you and your brand. And we will be taking next week off of Television. So in the meantime, if you want to get caught up on all the great content that we've been putting out over the last several months, by all means, feel free to visit us on our content hub, Stellarvision-hub, which you can see there right off of the stellarrising.com domain. And we'll be back in a couple weeks with some more exciting content. So thank you all for your time and attention. Have a wonderful weekend and a very happy Halloween. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.